The Swedish Prince Who Was a Jew. Among the Jews who were driven out of Spain, there was a wealthy man named Joseph Gabrieli. He had two daughters whom he married to wealthy suitors. After their exile, they wandered from one country to another, and during a plague, the husband of the elder daughter died. She then went to live with her sister, who had just given birth to a son and who was named Yehuda. A year later, Yehuda's father also died, and this, together with the reduced circumstances in which they now found themselves, caused the early death of the child's mother. Just before she died, she made her sister promise that when her son Yehuda would grow to manhood, she would explain his Jewish origin to him and try to induce him to return to Judaism. The aunt who had taken the child into her care had married a Swedish nobleman who told her that secretly he too was a Jew. He took his bride and Yehuda to his people in Sweden. They changed Yehuda's name to Johann, and he was brought up as a prince of royal blood, like a true Kambari. 2 years ago my husband died, concluded Prince Johann's aunt, and I then revealed to Johann that he was Yehuda, the grandson of Joseph Gabrieli, who was my father as well as his mother's. He had seen his grandfather's portrait and knows we are Jews. Yes, we have both decided we would like to return to the faith we belong to, but you can understand our difficulties, broke in the prince. We have so much to learn, and we need someone like you to befriend us and show us the way back, concluded the prince pleadingly. Nachum was deeply moved by the narrative, and by the sincerity shown by both the prince and his aged aunt. I am greatly honored by your confidence in me, said Nachum to them, but I must ask you to give me a few days in which to consider the matter and see what is the best thing to do. We know we can trust you to do your best. We have complete faith in you, replied the prince. We shall be waiting to hear from you most eagerly. With that they parted, and after a few days, Nachum returned to them and told them he had thought of a plan. He said that he was putting the affairs of the community in Sebesh, in which he was the leader, in order, so that he should be free within the next month or two to go away. He suggested that the prince and his aunt should go to Prague, and he too would come there and do all that was necessary to help them become Jews once again. He recommended to them to keep the whole matter a secret for the present. They told Nachum they wholeheartedly approved of his plan and suggestion, and that they trusted him implicitly. He must just tell them what to do, and they would carry out his instructions. About that matter of the purchase of the estates, said the prince, I shall hand over to you the power to negotiate it, and of course, I shall be happy to pay you for your trouble. I feel fortunate to have such a trustworthy agent to act for me. Nachum departed on the best of terms with his grateful hosts, and they too returned to their home in Sweden to wind up their affairs there and make all due preparations for moving to Prague. Meanwhile, Nachum returned home and called upon the Polish Count Banch Zinkevich, who was delighted to hear that Nachum had found a buyer for his estates. It was now merely a question of agreeing upon the price and arranging the transfer of the deeds. The transaction was concluded in a comparatively short period of time, to the equal satisfaction of both the Count and the Prince. After Nachum had so successfully and profitably concluded this business matter, he set about making preparations for his departure to Prague, where he had arranged to meet the prince and his aunt and see to all that was necessary to bring them back into the Jewish fold. After a short while, Nachum called together the members of the council of the Jewish community and informed them that he and his wife were preparing to return to Prague, from which they had come some 23 years previously. As they intended to remain in Prague for a considerable length of time, Nachum said he felt they ought to appoint a leader in his place. Nachum had a son called Tevel, who was quite a fine person, but was entirely different than his father. Whereas his father was an excellent businessman, Tevel had no taste for it at all. He owned some land which he had received upon his marriage from his father-in-law, and in addition rented some gardens and orchards, and himself worked there most successfully. Tevel always used to say he preferred to work next to nature rather than among businessmen, who could not always be trusted. He, on the other hand, had God as his partner, and that is why he was so successful, Tevel ended with a smile. The estates of the Swedish prince, together with those which the prince had acquired from the Polish count, were being supervised by a man who was very anxious to obtain the expert services of Tevel in the cultivation of this land. But Tevel refused, as it would have meant giving up the care of his own land, and also the land of his father, which was left in his care after his father's departure for Prague. Nachum had sold all his other property and cattle, but knowing how keen Tevel was on working on the land, he passed on his gardens and orchards to his son. For 2 years, Nachum remained in Prague, and when he returned, he began to distribute exceptionally large sums of money for charity and send big donations to the yeshivas in Poland. It did not occur to anyone that Nachum was giving money which was not all his own. Actually, it was the Swedish Prince Johann Kambari who, having now become a Jew, had decided to donate a worthwhile amount to Jewish causes. He asked Nachum to arrange the matter for him, and so that his name should not be mentioned, as he preferred to give the charity anonymously. This went on until a time came when Nachum felt he was about to die. He decided he must now entrust the secret to his son, so he called him and said to him, "My son, there is something I want to tell you concerning a certain person, which until now I have kept secret. Now that my days are numbered, I'm going to pass on the secret to you, but I ask you to honor it as I have done, and disclose it to no one." He then told Tevel about the Swedish Prince Kabari, how he had returned to his Jewish faith, and now called himself Yehuda Gabrieli, the name he was given at his birth. He told him that he, Nachum, had helped the prince in Prague, who had become so keen on things Jewish that he had spent most of his time learning Torah, and was by now already a considerable lamdan. He had married the daughter of a well-known and respected Jew in Prague, and now that she had given birth to a son, they had moved to Holland, to a place outside Amsterdam where he had bought a castle. Nachum asked Tevel to travel to the prince and give him some money that Nachum had of his, and at the same time to take him a message that he would advise the prince to sell his estates near Zebesh. Finally, he wanted Tevel to say goodbye to the prince for him and tell him he was thinking of him before he died. Tevel was very moved by all his father told him, and promised to carry out all he had asked him to do. He felt now that he had not, during his lifetime, sufficiently appreciated what a great man his father was, and he was determined to improve himself as far as he knew how. So it was, when he returned from his mission to the prince in Holland in 1599, began to follow in his father's steps and distribute large sums of money to charity, so much so that he became renowned both far and near. The more he gave, the greater seemed to be his success in increasing his fortune. But, however fine the harvest of his work, he and his wife could find no real happiness, for they were childless. Then, remembering that to change one's place can change one's luck, he and his wife decided that they would leave Zbech and settle in Vitebsk, in the vicinity of which he had a friend called Mordechai Arnsegal, who was his partner in a distillery of whiskey in Bad Ziekov.